Alright guys, quick lesson today. So if you guys are working on your driver this winter, you might want to work on your physical capabilities or your attributes so that you actually swing faster and you get maximum ball flight or maximum ball speed. But you also want to work on your setup with the driver, right? With the irons or maybe the putter or the chip shot, you have a different kind of setup almost every time because you have different undulations that you need to adapt to, different environments, different shots. But with the driver, you almost have a flat surface all the time and you have access to wherever you want to put the ball and tee it up, right? So if you have a default environment for the driver almost all the time, you want to have a default setup so that you can have a default ball flight, right? Makes sense? So you want to make sure that your setup is in a way that gives you the best chance of hitting that ball flight that you want. And one of the most important things about the driver is that no matter what kind of ball flight shape that you want, most of the times you're going to want to hit up on the ball, right? That's the driver. You tee it up, you want to hit up on the ball as you come into the impact area. So you want to have a setup that complies to that impact factor. Most of the times people know this, their spine angle should be tilted away from the target so that you have a better chance of hitting up on the ball. But a lot of people know this, but actually maybe because of how they aim, how they look at the hole, how they set up to the tee box, they end up with a spine tilt that is either perpendicular or that is tilted towards the target like this, okay? And that's going to cause a lot of problems with the impact factors, right? As you're going to hit down on the ball, you might hit across the ball, you're going to hit big slices or big hooks to the left. So you want to have a setup where your spine tilt is almost away from the target all the time, and you want to have a system that systematically ensures that you have that setup all the time consistently, okay? So that's the first imperative element of the setup that you want to make sure that you always have. But another element that you want to consider with your setup is the width of your stance, right? So if you're too wide, you might have trouble actually transferring your weight or your pressure to the lead leg on the downswing. And if you're too narrow, then you might have trouble hitting up on the ball. You might actually have to move your head back or your balance is going to be compromised. So you don't want to be too wide or too narrow. I think you want to be a little bit wider than your shoulder width. That should be a good measure for your stance. But you want to have your stance and your spine tilt almost always the same with the driver shot so that you can replicate this all the time on the tee box. So if you're working on your physical attributes, that's great. You want to increase your speed, that's great for the winter. But during the winter, you also want to make your impeccable setup repeatable over and over again so that you don't have any more variables that you need to consider when you're going out on the course. Okay? So work on your setup as well as your physical attributes during the winter so that you have a consistent shot or consistent system overall that you can use in the spring. So now I'm going to show you my system of setting up in a good way that I use on the course, all right? So when I get on the tee box, I make sure that I find a spot that I am most comfortable with. For reference, I don't want the ball to be lower than my feet. I want the ball to be a little bit higher than my feet. And also, I don't want my right foot to be higher than my left foot. That's going to kind of mess with my spine angle, okay? So I look for the spot on the tee box where those conditions are satisfied. And when I find it, I make sure I tee the ball up right in that spot so that I ensure my setup. And after I do that, I make sure I aim correctly, and then I make sure that my right shoulder is lower than my left. That ensures that my spine tilt is away from the target, okay? After I do that, I wiggle my feet a little bit, trying to find the right width for my stance. And after I do, I can make sure that I'm setting up in a good way that I can replicate every time. And once I do that, I have more confidence that I can hit a good shot, or I have more probability of hitting a good shot. And I'm going to give it a try here. So if you're able to make your setup consistent over time and replicate it over and over again, find the best conditions where you want to tee off of, you can eliminate a lot of different variables that are on the golf course. And that way you can almost replicate the environment where your playing environment is almost the same as your practice environment, right? It's on a flat surface, it's like this in an indoor practicing area. You can replicate that environment out on the course as well, and that's going to translate better to your game as a score.